Hello and welcome guys, it's Stefan here once more from Stefanzy. Now I just want to go over today my Fantasy League team, obviously having just picked it ahead of the new season, which starts this weekend. I wanted to give you a heads up as to who I've picked and why, albeit in short. Now we'll start obviously with the goalkeeper. So I picked Matt Ryan of Brighton, so he's a new recruit, he's freshly come into the club, joining from Valencia, from La Liga, and prior to that he was with Club Rouge, I believe, in Belgium, and even prior to that still he's quite a young goalkeeper. But being from New Zealand, I obviously follow the A-League, which is the Australian Premier League, if you like, in terms of football. So probably at least four or five years ago now, Matt Ryan was with a side called the Central Coast Mariners from Australia, and obviously performed very well for them as a very, very young goalkeeper. And he's since gone on to do great things, like I say, in Europe with Valencia, and now he's signed with Brighton. So I'm going to give him a chance in goal. I do think he'll take a while to settle in, but certainly his track record thus far is pretty promising, so we'll see how he does there. Now at right back, now just looking at my screen here, my fullbacks aren't actually panned to the side, they're kind of clumped into the middle there. But Ryan Bertrand, obviously of Southampton, very promising talent. Well, not really promising anymore. I think he's already starting to grow into his own in terms of his role. Obviously, previously with Chelsea, came onto the scene very abruptly in that Champions League final a couple of years back with Chelsea, and he was wanted by Liverpool, I believe, earlier this summer before they acquired Andy Robertson from Hull. So Ryan Bertrand is there. Antonio Valencia, again Valencia, is my captain, obviously of Manchester United. A very underrated player, probably one of the most underrated players, I must say, in Premier League history, if I'm completely frank. And he must have been at United now for at least 6 or 7 years, I understand. I believe it was 2010. I might have to correct myself shortly on that. When he did sign originally from Wigan Athletic, you might remember he was with prior to joining United. So he's my captain in there. And just a heads up on why I've selected him as captain, he's generally quite consistent, very physical, loves going down the wing, very quick. We saw actually in recent weeks in pre-season, in fact, I believe it was against Valoranga. I might be wrong, but he went around the player, put the ball around the player, obviously on his outside, ran around the other side and whipped in a neat cross. So if he does more of that kind of thing, I can see him certainly being consistent, and also defensively too. So elsewhere, the two centre-backs, the centre-back pairing. So elsewhere, my centre-back pairing is actually David Luiz and John Stones, two controversial defenders, you might say. Obviously, they love playing the ball on the deck, and they're both quite technical, which is really why I picked them. I do certainly have a bias when it comes to ball-playing centre halves, so that's why they're both in there. And again, that is a bit of a risk, I do understand that, because they are prone to errors half the time. So we'll see how that goes. I might have to tweak that somewhat in the beginning, well, once the season begins, and we see how they do. Anyhow, so moving on to the midfield, we'll start with Christian Eriksen, obviously of Spurs, and next to him Dele Alli of the same club. Two, again, very technical players. I'm being very impressed, obviously, with the meteoric rise of Dele Alli in recent years. And with Christian Eriksen, again, I think he came back into his own last season after some decidedly patchy form for a while there, a couple of seasons back. And it's strange, because I think initially he was sort of overrated, then became really underrated, and now he's sort of finding the middle ground somewhere in between there, which I think is going to be of benefit. And certainly great with the ball, great passer, great at free kicks, etc. And really, I don't need to go into Dele Alli too much, as you can probably imagine. He's, for me, got it all. I definitely agree with the comparisons to Steven Gerrard. I would certainly say he's up there. Slightly more advanced, I think, where he plays, by the way. He's sort of more of a number 10, whereas Gerrard obviously was a number 8. Now, next to those Spurs players, we have Aaron Moy, again an Australian, actually an international colleague of Matt Ryan's. Now, Moy is with Huddersfield, and you might remember Aaron Moy was with Huddersfield last season on loan from Manchester City. So he was actually signed originally by City when he was still in Australia, and again I was watching him when he played in the A-League. He was initially with a team called Western Sydney Wanderers, who incidentally just played Arsenal in a pre-season friendly, and after that he was with a team called Melbourne City, who actually belonged to the City Group. So they're affiliated directly with Manchester City, hence the signing. But he's now come back, and I believe he's signed permanently with Huddersfield. So just a heads up on what he's all about. So again, great from set pieces, a little bit similar to Christian Eriksen, you might argue, in many respects. A great passer of the ball. Obviously, you can see a theme emerging here. I do love my passes, and those who are perhaps more defensive but have that sort of technical nous, if you like. So he's certainly in keeping with that. And next to him, I've got Willian. Again, a player I think who's been overlooked unnecessarily, unfairly, so far across his time at Chelsea. Willian, and he's actually my vice captain for that reason. I think he's going to weigh in with quite a few assists and goals this season, and I think technically, again, dribbling past players, going past players, making really good off the ball runs, etc. I think he's going to do that in abundance, Willian. And finally up front, in short, we have Marcus Rashford and next to him Christian Benteke. So again, Rashford I think has just come on leaps and bounds since he broke onto the scene a couple of seasons ago against Arsenal in the Premier League. And despite the signing of Lukaku, I still think Rashford's going to be given plenty of chances, and he's arguably going to do just as well. That's a big call, but I still think he's going to quietly go about his business. Obviously, you would have seen plenty of him, I'm sure, last season and the season before that. Great on the ball. Great intelligence. For such a young player, he certainly knows how to make runs in and behind, and he's generally quite clever with his movement off the ball, and obviously on the ball, a great finisher as well. So next to him, Christian Benteke, and again, a similar sort of story. Again, more of a clinical goal poacher, if you like, who I think came back into his own last season after a pretty disappointing spell at Liverpool, as we all know about. So that's Christian Benteke. He rounds off the team, and we'll see how we go. Obviously, this weekend it all begins in earnest with the opening match on Friday night, Arsenal vs Leicester, and we'll see how it all pans out. I might indeed have to tweak a few things as the season does indeed progress over the coming months, but for now I'm pretty confident that this team will do all right. Cheers.